up, we have the essay 1 assignment. So I'm not going to read this assignment sheet to you, but if you haven't read it yet in full, I would encourage you to pause right here, read the assignment sheet, and then come back to the video and keep going. So now that you're familiar with the assignment sheet, there's just a couple little tidbits I'd like to point out to you. So the first thing is the importance of selecting an author who will be a good topic of study for this semester. And that's in part why I am having you do the author selection reflection that I will talk about in a moment. So for your encounter with the author essay, one specific element of this that I wanted to highlight is that although, of course, you'll probably tell me, in general, why you like this author in this assignment, I do want you to pick one specific encounter with this author also that you'll tell me about within this essay. So the example I give you is Stephen King. I happen to love Stephen King, and I've loved him my whole life. But if I were writing this essay, I don't want to turn in an essay that just really generally talks about how I love Stephen King. I want to include one particular instance of sort of connection with him or his work. So my example would be when I was a young girl and I snuck into the adult section of the library and checked out The Shining. That would be my sort of really specific encounter. Other than that, just remember to use your MLA format, and don't forget to give me your word count beneath your heading. That'll be important too. Finally, don't forget right here, this is probably one of the biggest issues that I see in the first essay is people forgetting to include those 3 quotations or summaries from a primary source and that works cited page. So if you have any questions about how to cite those sources, or you need a little help with that, you can contact me or you can see a tutor in the Writing Center. They'll be happy to help you out. So again, please make sure you read that whole assignment sheet really thoroughly and let me know if there's anything that's not clear or if you have any questions. Do notice at the end of the assignment sheet, you'll see this little blurb repeated over and over again throughout the semester, because I just like to include a lot of helpful links and resources for you. So don't forget to scroll all the way through the documents, because often at the end I include like tips or tricks or like helpful resources, as you can see here. The last thing I wanted to mention today is the author selection reflection, which you'll see here. And the purpose of this assignment is to allow me to give you feedback on the person that you're selecting to study this semester. So in terms of the author you select, it's pretty wide open, and I hope that that's exciting for you. I personally would be more than happy to offer you some suggestions, and I'll actually be posting links to some resources that I think would be helpful for you and would include some cool authors that you might be interested to check out. But let me offer you a few pieces of advice or a few caveats. One type of book that I've seen students have a lot of trouble with are kind of self-helpy type books. And the example I will give is a book called Girl Wash Your Face. When a book does not have a lot of literary value to it, I'm not saying those books aren't valuable, but for the types of things we're going to be writing about this semester, those types of books make it very, very challenging to write about. So as I say in this second or third bullet point down here, you should be very careful of like one-off writers, people who just published a book or two, people who publish those types of, chicken soup for the soul type of books. Again, it's not that there's anything wrong with those books or that they're bad. They're just not necessarily a choice for this project, because you need to be studying this writer throughout the whole semester. And you also need to conduct research, including scholarly research about these folks. And there's just not that much scholarly research out there about these types of authors. Can you write about a children's book author? Yes. Absolutely. Those books can have great literary merit and value and leave you a lot of room to research. Can you write about graphic novels and comic books? Yes, absolutely. Can you choose a screenwriter and write about the screenplays that person wrote? Yes, absolutely. So keep in mind that expansive definition of writer, okay? For example, I had a student last semester who wrote a brilliant series of essays about a nonfiction writer who focused on meditation. And it was so interesting. There were great avenues for research, but it wasn't like, a fiction novel, something like To Kill a Mockingbird, which might be the first thing that comes to students' minds. So sort of keep your mind open about that. The last thing I'll mention is that sometimes choosing an award-winning or a better-known author can be a good choice simply because there are a lot of choices available out there for them. So in other words, there's been a lot of research, there's been a lot of things published, so you're kind of making it a little bit easy for yourself in the long run by tapping into an academic body of work that already exists. Now, of course, the challenge in that case is going to be creating something new, right, to say about that topic. So before I mentioned the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, and that's an example of a book that I might say, oh, I don't think that's a good topic for this. Number one, it has a very low reading level. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. As I said, you can write about children's literature, but it's not a very challenging text, right? Most of us read that in like 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. The other thing about To Kill a Mockingbird is that it has been written about so much that there are very few original ideas left out there. I'm not saying it would be impossible to write a new paper about it, but certainly to write something that wasn't just a regurgitation of ideas that are already well known about that book, I think would be very difficult. So if you have an author in mind and you're not 100% sure if that person is the correct fit for this assignment, please do not hesitate to get into contact with me. I would be very happy to talk through it with you and maybe offer you some ideas or some people, some suggestions of names that you could use. But I hope that you're able to choose someone that you feel really passionate and inspired to learn about and spend some time with that writer this semester. Now, you might be wondering if more than one person from class can choose to study the same author. And my answer to that is absolutely. I would actually be excited if that happened. Of course, then what we would need to be careful as we worked throughout the semester is to avoid plagiarism. So that would be avoiding plagiarizing from each other's ideas, of course, right? It's not really a good feeling when you're in a writing group and you bring an idea in your draft and then suddenly it appears in someone else's draft. You know, we want to stay away from things like that. But I do think that collaborating and sharing ideas about an author could be really exciting and really cool. So we'll talk about ways to avoid plagiarism. We'll talk about ways, you know, to keep you guys from handing in an identical paper. But if there's folks in class who want to sort of group up with an author together and study that person this semester, I encourage it. So feel free to think about it. So if you have any questions about the Essay 1 assignment, do please feel free to let me know. I'm going to pause here really quickly to pull up some more resources to share with you, and I'll be back momentarily. Stay tuned. All right, so let me screen share again and take a peek at some of the resources that I have linked from the Essay 1 assignment sheet. So back over on the Essay 1 assignment sheet, down in the helpful resources area, you'll notice that I've included several links to places where you can find free authors online that I think would be fabulous subjects for study this semester. So just a real quick tour through some of these links. The first is Project Gutenberg, which offers over 60,000 free ebooks. It has like the complete collected works of Shakespeare. You can find so many fabulous books for free on Project Gutenberg. So if you're wanting to look for a book or some things by some certain writers, but you don't want to go out and spend a bunch of money, think about checking out Project Gutenberg. You might be thinking to yourself, I don't really have enough time this semester to be getting into reading a whole novel, right? So if you're in that boat, I would strongly urge you to consider selecting a poet for this semester. And a great place to start looking for poets is at the Poetry Foundation's website. So something that I really like about their website, on the front page, they'll just feature sort of, a new author or whatever's going on with poetry. And under the poems and poets link, you can find many different links to take you to different types of poems, but I'm looking specifically at the collections. So this is a great place to come and find maybe something that might relate to you personally. So here we see a collection for you for US Latinx voices in poetry. Down below here, we have poems about sickness and recovery. We have summer poems. There are poems about different identities, crises, different eras, different periods, different historical events. So that might be a good place to start browsing to look for a writer that interests you. And the really fabulous thing about studying poetry or a poet is that the work is quickly digestible, right? Usually a poem can be read much more quickly than a novel or a short story, but a poem is also packed with meaning. So you still have plenty to write about, even if the poem seems short and sweet compared to a novel. Another link that I included for you folks that I think is really cool is the Digital Living Poets Library. So when you click on that link, it will bring you to this cool sort of Google Doc spreadsheet scenario. I'm not exactly sure how they created it. And each of these poets is actually a living poet, which I think is really, really cool. Now, if you're thinking poetry is nothing but like a bunch of dead old white men telling you a rhyme about a daffodil, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. And there's a whole wide world of modern contemporary poetry out there that I think would interest you at the very least, and for some of you might blow your minds. So I strongly, strongly encourage you to explore some of these living poets. There are so many incredible ones listed. I'll give a quick shout out to Fatima Ashgar, who you see on the right-hand side of the screen. If you want a fabulous example of the types of poems I'm talking about, watch her reading her poem called Pluto Shits on the Universe. Trust me, check it out. So think about coming to study one of these living poets. Another resource for living poets is the teachlivingpoets.com website, which I've linked to in the site. This is created specifically with teachers in mind, but the great thing about it is that it includes links to lots and lots of helpful resources. So it comes packed with lesson plans and information about poets. You can often find videos of the poets and a lot of sort of related ancillary materials. So if you're a future English teacher, this is certainly an awesome site, or a future teacher in any case. But for our class, I think it could be a helpful resource too. So I want to stop here. I don't want these videos to get too long, but if you have any questions about any of the upcoming assignments, please do let me know. And otherwise, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Talk soon. Bye-bye.